here's what we're going to do. Let's do this the right way. You guys stay in your boat. Tomorrow, my people are going to come out and they're going to carry your boat into town and they're going to treat you the way you deserve to be treated because, you are the guys in charge now. And so they were like high fiving, yeah. And so the next morning, they're waiting in their boat. Her people come out, the Kyiv Rus come out, and they carry the boat through the city walls, and they carry it directly into a trench that they had dug the night before, and they toss the boat and all the emissaries into the hole, and the people fill the hole up with dirt, and she buries all of them alive. Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of WTF History, where we tell you some stories that we hope make you say, what the? And you let us know who you think had a better story. Mike, I'm really looking forward to this. I think the thread that ties these together is looking at a transitional time in human history. Mine takes place in the 10th century. When does yours take place?
It takes place really over the span of 2,000 years, but much of it takes place in that same period of time.
So Mike's story is grand in scope.
Not quite.
But hey, if you guys please, while we have this moment, please subscribe and give us a like. I think we're making an effort to try and get in the studio a little more often, right, Mike?
Yes.
We
I even
Dave
put on my
Johnson.
non-threatening sweater today. So
Yeah,
that,
yeah. What is?
this is like the Mr. Rogers. Oh, that guy.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. So I want to talk today about one of history's bad acts. And what I have learned is that some parts of the world know her very, very, very well. But to me, I had never heard of this person. I should have. Now, as it always goes in, when you're talking about history from the 10th century, how much of it is true, how much of it was made up later by scribes, how much of it was made to teach a lesson, I don't know. So I want to talk about Olga. She's also known as Princess Olga, Saint Olga. She was later canonized, which we will mention. She was a Varangian, which is a Viking. She was of Varangian origin, and she was born in a place called Pleskov. We're not sure which is like in Ukraine, Belarus, right? In that area. Little is known about Olga. Even her birth date is a little different. We it's anywhere from 890 to 920 is what I read. She was married to Prince Igor again, who was the prince for the Kyiv Rus people in that whole Belarus, Ukraine, parts of Russia. And she had a son by the name of Svetoslav. Oh God, that's a tough
it's a
word.
household name.
Yeah. Igor was a warlike guy, right? Igor was he liked his wars, he liked his tribute, and not uncommon in those days, right? That's kind of the world we lived in. So they had a complex relationship, the Kiev Rus, with the Drevlians. So the Drevlians were another group, and again, it was a complex relationship. It was kind of frenemy. They would help them fight the Byzantines, but then they would fight the Drevlians. The Drevlians would pay them tribute, but then they would stop paying tribute. It was a very, very complex relationship. So Igor's older brother died, and so Igor had to assert himself, right, as the man. And so he went out there, and because they had stopped paying tribute, right, after his older brother died, and he assumed the power, he assumed the throne. And so he went to the Drevlians, and he was like, "Hey, you got to pay me my tribute. What's going on here?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, okay. Here's your tribute. We got you. Our fault." And so he leaves, and he had come with a big army. That's important. He had come with a big army of Kiev Rus. And so Igor goes, and then on his way back, he's like, "Dude, they shortchanged me. Like, this isn't the kind of tribute that they used to give to my brother." So he takes a smaller group. He goes back to the Drevlians and he says, "Dude, you guys shortchanged me." And they were like, "You know what? F you. Now we're going to take care of you." And so they captured Prince Igor and they killed him. And they killed him in a very, like, almost serial killer Saw movie way. They took two birch trees and they bent them over, and to one birch tree they tied one leg, and to the other birch tree they tied another of his other leg, and then they let the birch trees go. And as
Yikes.
the birch trees went back up, they essentially split him in half.
Uh,
And that was the end of poor Prince Igor. So now you got the Drevlians who have taken out Prince Igor. His brother is dead. So they're like, yes, it's our turn. And so they sent a group of 20 emissaries to Igor's wife, Princess Olga. And the 20 emissaries go there and they're like, hey, Prince Mal of the Drevlians, he believes that you should wed him and kind of unify our people. And Princess Olga is like, you know what? That's pleasing to my ears. I really like that. By the way, they took a boat, right? Rivers.
Sure.
We know the
Sure.
area, right? A lot of river
Yeah,
traffic.
and we should stress, these people were called Kiev and Rus. That's what they're called, but these were Vikings. These were people
They're
from
Vikings.
Scandinavia
Yep,
who had sailed down rivers to begin with, the great navigable rivers of Eastern Europe to get to these areas,
that's
and
right.
these were accessible, and that's where they decided to settle.
So yeah, good point. Yes. So they took the boat up, right, to Princess Olga, said, hey, we want to marry, our Prince Mal thinks you should be his wife, unify our people. It's like, pleasing to my ears. Here's what we're gonna do. Let's do this the right way. You guys stay in your boat. Tomorrow, my people are gonna come out and they're gonna carry your boat into town and they're gonna treat you the way you deserve to be treated because you are the guys in charge now. And so they were like high fiving, yeah. And so the next morning, they're waiting in their boat. Her people come out, the Kyiv Rus come out, and they carry the boat through the city walls and they carry it directly into a trench that they had dug the night before. And they toss the boat and all the emissaries into the hole. And the people fill the hole up with dirt and she buries all of them alive.
Wow.
So
Better
then,
than a birch tree.
what?
Better than a
What?
birch tree, but still barbaric.
So then Olga sends a message to the prince and says, I think you should send your most distinguished men, to Kiev so that I can meet them and so they can we can have a party to bring me back to you. But I only want to be brought back, in the envoy of your people, of your finest, leaders. I think that's appropriate. And of course, Prince Mal is like, yeah, right. And so he sends a group of his top leaders. I feel like the poor Drevlians are like the coyote and Roadrunner and Coyote, like,
Yes.
and Olga is the Roadrunner. Um, so Prince Mal sends like some of his best guys, and they go there. They ride, and they get to the city of Kiev, and she's like, "Thank you. This is the way we should have done it from the beginning. All's gone. You guys won." And she's like, "But you know what? We're going to treat you right. You guys go take a shower. You're going to wash up in our bathhouse, and our people are going to treat you the way you deserve to be treated as the the cream of the crop." So they all go into the bathhouse. They're all showering. Suddenly, they hear the doors lock, and the Kyiv people, they set the bathhouse on fire. So all of the upper echelon of
Wow.
the Drevlians are suddenly burned alive, in
Jeez.
addition to those that had been buried alive. So Olga's not done yet. So Olga is like, because remember, Mike, and this is important, there's no communication. Like, they can't
Yeah.
pick up the phone and go, hey, where are our guys? They're just
Yeah.
assuming they're on the way, right? Because you don't
Sure.
know.
Yeah.
And so she sends a messenger to the Drevlians and said, "Hey, we're on our way back. Can you prepare? I want to go before we marry. I want to go to where my husband was, where he's buried, and I want to have a feast so that I can honor him before I enter into matrimony with you." And they're like, "Yeah, that sounds right. That's cool. Okay, let's do that." So all of the Drevlians, they all go there, and they're all having a great feast party. And she had ordered her people, the Kyiv Rus, to make sure that they never run out of mead. So the Drevlians are having a great time. They're drinking, they're all wasted. And then here come her soldiers. And they annihilated them. Even though they were outnumbered, they annihilated them because they were just totally wasted on mead. 5,000 died.
Wow.
But Olga's not done. So Olga has not fully avenged Igor yet. So she wants to go not to where he was buried, but she wants to go to the city where he was killed. So she goes and she lays siege to the city, and she's sieging it for I think it's a year. And she is like, finally, after all this, she tells them, "Look, why aren't you guys? What are you doing? Like all your other cities are paying tribute to me. Just give it up. Come on, let's go." And they're like, "No, because we know what you've done to everybody else, and honestly, we don't really trust you, Olga." And she's like, "Okay, you know what? That's fair. All I ask is that every house bring me 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows. And they're like, really? That's all you want as far as tribute goes? Like that's good? She's like, yeah, that's all I want. You bring me from every house three pigeons and 3 sparrows, and you know what? Let's call it a day. But that's, to me, that means something. And they're like, done. And so they deliver all these pigeons and all these sparrows to her. She has her people put little sacks of sulfur. Now, if you like animals, you might want to go past this. She has little bags of sulfur tied with rags hanging out, and she has all of them tied to the leg of the pigeons and the sparrows. And remember, they have nests at all these houses, right? So they want to go back to where they came from. And then her people light the rags and they release the pigeons and the sparrows. They go back to the homes in the city that's being besieged, the Drevlian city, and the
Wow.
entire city goes up in flames. It's
Wow.
said that not a single home survived. They all died. And
Wow.
Olga was done. So Olga Olga remained as regent to her son, because he was 3 years old when his father died. So she was regent for a very long time. She later went to Byzantium, where she had a relationship, a father son or a father daughter relationship with Constantine VII.
Hmm.
That's where she was baptized as a Christian. There's some stories about her and Constantine, but I really don't know if they're true or not. I think they might be apocryphal. And so she came back. She tried to spread Christianity in Kyiv. It didn't really catch on until a couple generations later. But because she was baptized and became a Christian at that time, that's why she was canonized later, in the 13th century. So I think everyone needs to know who Olga, the Princess of Kiev Rus is.
Well, I love that story, and now mine is going to seem mighty dry in comparison. But we do start though, however, in the same period of time, which is there's a period of time, as you said, the 10th century. So for everybody, this is 900 AD, and the period immediately before it, where the world was really conclusively, finally in transition. And what do I mean by that? Well, Charlemagne had been crowned in 800 AD. Now the world had two empires, and there was the Holy Roman, Western Roman Empire again, in theory, and there was the Eastern Roman Empire. But I think if you were a resident in France at the time, or you were a resident of Spain, it's really this time where you realize Rome's not coming back. There's not going to be centralized authority ever again. It's really at this point in the world where, and I don't think this is a coincidence, besides having sort of geopolitical certainty that there wasn't going to be revival of the Roman Empire, you started to see fascinating linguistic changes. And what I mean by that is, if you look up when did French emerge, they actually know when French emerged. And that was, Charlemagne, of course, was a Frank. He spoke German as his native language, or a Germanic dialect. So Charlemagne, when he died, he passed his empire on to his son, and that son tried to pass it on to his sons, but he had three, and they were Charles the Bald, Louis the German, and Lothair. And what's fascinating is to this day, right? As you might expect, Louis the German held the eastern part of Charlemagne's empire. Charles the Bald held the western part, and Lothar held the central part. And of course,
Wasn't it Lothar the Fat?
no, there was a Charles the Fat in there. These guys had great names, right?
I
But
know, I know.
but
All right, go ahead. Yeah.
Lothair's realms, is the Benelux countries to this day. And of course, the other two is France and Germany. But the fascinating thing is that these sons, they had this huge spat when their father died, and it was basically a succession crisis for like 60 years. And they all lived until they were very old. And finally, when Charles the Bald and Louis the German decided that they were going to patch it up, they were very, very old men, and they went to talk to each other, and they didn't speak the same language anymore. And that was because
Oh,
Louis the German still spoke Frankish. He had preserved it in his eastern part of the realm. But Charles the Bald spoke French. He did not speak Latin anymore. The
huh.
oaths of Strasbourg, the oaths that these armies took, his men and him spoke the first starting pieces of French. Same thing was happening in Spain at the same time in history you're talking about, this chaotic period. You have the first time where Spanish emerges, and it's not Latin anymore, it's Spanish. And the same thing, the same time is happening in Italy. You have people, instead of speaking Latin, they are speaking Italian, recognized to be Italian. What I got started to obsess on is, when did the name of cities change? When did all these old cities on the periphery of the Roman Empire become to know what we know them as today? So here is, I guess you could call this the linguistic origins of some major cities. And, I think it's fascinating because, if you go up to somebody whose last name is Zaragoza, right? And you say, oh, I know what you're named after. And the person will be like, what are you talking about? Well, the city of Zaragoza in Spain, right? Any guess on what the original name of that city was?
No.
Okay, so the original name of that city was Caesar Augusta. Okay, now
Oh,
In Latin, of course, it would be pronounced Kaiser Augusta. But then in Spain, they started pronouncing that C as more of a soft C, and so they started pronouncing it as Caesar Augusta. And if you say it really fast, you get Zaragoza. And this was
oh,
happening at that time,
that's
which
good.
I think is fascinating.
That is
Um,
good.
you go to England, okay? uh, they had a colony there called Lindum Colonia Domitiana. And of course, when someone says, hey, I'm going into San Francisco, they say, I'm going to the city. When someone talks about Los Angeles, they say, I'm going to LA. Lindum Colonia Domitiana was too hard to pronounce to the medieval English. So they
What?
shortened it to Lynn Colonia, and the city became
Lincoln.
known as Lincoln. Yeah, Lincoln. And people wonder, why was Abraham Lincoln so swarthy? Well, his ancestors came from this part, probably had a lot of Roman blood,
Nice.
Abraham Lincoln. England again, there was a city that the Romans called Eboracum, and the British just shortened it to York. And of course, it was the British sailing to the New World and creating a New York that very few people know, but New York, named after a Roman city. And then, of course, in France, there was a city that was founded by the Emperor Aurelian, and he called the city Aurelianum. And of course, the French over time shortened that to Orleans. And of
Hmm.
course, in the New World, of course, there's a New Orleans as well. So amazing things that these linguistic changes that were happening at that time. Also in Spain, you had a city named Augusta Emerita, and it just became known as Merida, right? And so modern Spain, Merida. You go to Germany. They had a city named Augusta Vindelicorum Castra, which means Augustus's fort in this area, and that's just now known as Augsburg, which is in German. It's how you really say Augustus's fort, Augsburg, right? Another fascinating one, which shows the linguistic changes that were happening at this time. In Germany, you had a Roman city named Colonia Claudia, but that's a big long name. And if you're German, and you're not speaking Latin anymore, you're speaking Frankish or whatever dialect you're speaking, they just now call it Cologne or
Cologne.
Cologne. Right? Yep, exactly. And it just, I mean, you think about like the city of Cologne, it literally just means the colony.
Yeah, yeah.
They were colonized and they named it after their colonizers. Well, that's Cologne, Germany. Um, Even in Italy, in the periphery, I mean, most of the Italian names of cities stayed the same because the language was still the same. But in northern Italy, there was a place they had conquered that had been Celtic, and they called it Valley di Augusta. Augustus's Valley. He was one who brought it inside the Roman Empire, and now it's called Val d'Aosta. They just, instead of
Oh,
saying Valley di Augusta, they say Val d'Aosta, right?
yeah.
And I just think it's amazing how these cities. Their names got shortened and they became vernacular in this era. Here's another one. In northeast Italy, there was a city called Forum Julii. The forum city of the Julius Caesar's family, Forum Julii, and now they call it Friuli, right? It's like basically everyone just started talking real fast,
Yeah,
in
that's what
this
it sounds
period.
like.
And here's another one for you. In Spain, Colonia Caecilia Metellinum, it just became known as Medellin, right?
Oh,
It's just,
geez.
yeah, they just took the last bit and just made it really fast, right? And and finally, I mean, just one more flavor is of course, and I think I've alluded to this one before with you, but you might forget Hannibal. What was Hannibal's last name? Do you remember?
Barca, Barcelona.
Yeah, Barca, and Barcelona.
Yeah.
It had this big long name. It was basically Hannibal, Barca's city, and now it's just Barcelona, right? And it is fascinating. how many cities in Europe have these weird, obscure origins? Pamplona was originally named like Pompey's blah 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 city, blah 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 blah, and now it's just Pamplona, right? And I'm amazed at like how like the people, like what it must have been like to live at this period of time. If you were living in the East with your vignette, like when did these identities emerge? When did you stop being a Varangian and a Viking, a Dane, and when did you start being a Ukrainian, right? And in the West, like when did they know, you know what, we're not Roman anymore. Even though there's names, we're really not Roman, we're French or we're Spanish. And it's just such a fascinating question to me because I know that our society too, at some point, will fall, we will change. And when will we know? When will we, know that some people say that the presidency changed so much during FDR that we are living in something totally different, one of the founding fathers envisioned. So I think this is important, fascinating era of history. I'm glad you delved into the wonderful 900s,
Well,
and I hope everybody enjoyed this episode.
you forgot one of my favorites, which is Cartagena. All the different Cartagenias, which are
Yes,
from Carthage, right?
Carthage. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
And you see Cartagenias everywhere, and it wasn't because the Carthaginians, yeah, they were in the Mediterranean, but they went to Spain, and then the Spaniards carried their
yeah,
name across the world.
for sure,
Yeah,
for
so
sure.
that's pretty interesting.
But
Yeah,
next time
that
you see
was
someone with the last name Zaragoza, be like, "Oh, you're named after Caesar," and they're like, What? What are you talking about?" Right? Yeah, well,
yeah,
they were.
I love it. Dude, Mike, that was great. This was a fun episode. I really appreciate it. If you guys appreciate it, give us a sub
Give
or a
us a
like.
like.
But yeah, I can't wait till we get to do the next one, man. And I like how you always work Rome into everything. That's pretty cool.
You know it, baby. All right, we'll see you next time, everybody.
Hey, if you like what you hear, like and subscribe. It really means a lot, and we would love to have you coming back every week. Thank you.